now we have a quorum of our committee. Dr. Figueroa, as an advisory member, are you here?
I am here.
Dr. Handy, as an advisory member.
Yep.
Dr. Linden, advisory member.
Present.
Dr. Reese, advisory member.
Present.
And Dr. Williams, advisory member.
I'm present.
Now, for purposes of the quorum, Chair Fletcher.
Present.
Regent Cox. Regent Green.
Present.
Regent Whitten.
Present.
Okay. That gives us 2 votes, but 3 members. And we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. So let's go ahead and get started. The time is now 4:33, and I appreciate everyone being here today. Before we go much further, I know Dr. Williams was going to have a couple of folks from the system office to speak with us today. If anyone else has someone attending with them, if you would go ahead and recognize them and introduce them to the group now, I would appreciate that.
Did you want me to introduce my 2, Regent Fletcher? Or just wait? Regent Fletcher? We seem to, I'm sorry, you froze there. Did you want me to go ahead and introduce my 2 folks?
Now, yes, please.
Thank you. I have online today Dr. Natalie Gibson, who's here in case there are questions about the diversity plan report, and also Alicia Crouch is attending to help with data concerns. So both are in the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda today is approval of the minutes from the previous meeting, the April 8th meeting. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to take a look at those and review those. Are there any additions, edits, or corrections to those? Anyone have any comments? Okay, hearing none, can we, oh, sorry.
I do have one just very minor request. There's a doctor title listed before my name, and for the record, just so that we're, just for clarification, I would request that that be kindly removed.
Thank you, that is noted. And Hannah, can you take care of that edit for us?
Yes, Chair, thank you.
And are there any other additions, corrections, or edits to these minutes? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved. Brianna Whitten.
Thank you, Regent Whitten. Do we need a second, Pam, or can we take these?
You need a second, but then the vote can be by consensus.
Okay.
Second.
Is that Dr. Reese?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
If there are no objections, we can take them by consensus.
Thank you. Are there any objections? Corrections, I'm assuming not, but hand up. Okay, I'm accepting those, Pam. I don't see anyone with any objection at that point.
Correct.
Okay, so the next item on, thank you. The next item on our agenda is going to be To pick up where we kind of left off in the last meeting with old business and with information about the dual test. And this is where I believe that Dr. Williams and Chancellor Williams and her team are going to present some information to us today.
I am sorry that we can go back.
So one of the items under this business.
I'm sorry, Chair Fletcher, you're breaking up and I'm not hearing you, but I apologize. We did not have, we can pull up the CPE dual credit, but we did not get that message before. So I don't have anything in OnBase or prepared for that. Have shared information with you, but I don't know. I mean, it's clearly here and but I don't have anything ready on dual credit. So I apologize that I missed a communication there.
Okay, so do you want to go ahead? Do you have information for the next item, which is the soft skills information and the essential standards for the online education?
Yes, thank you. Those are in the presentation. The soft skills document is a research report that Regent Fletcher requested to talk about the relationship between online education and soft skill development. This was a question that came out of the last meeting. Our ORPA staff reviewed the research. There's not a huge amount of research out there, but the research does show that you can use online courses to provide soft skill development. We have 2 colleges working on that now. Hannah, if you would scroll down, please, towards the end with the information on the 2 colleges. I think you need to go back up just a little bit there in that last portion. And so Bluegrass is one of the 2 colleges. And then Elizabethtown is the other, and both are through their QEP, which is the Quality Enhancement Plan, a plan that's required by SAC-COC during the 10-year accreditation to review college practices and look at how to improve them. ECTC and BCTC are both trying to improve student soft skills through new courses and online modules. We do not have outcomes from that, but it'll be very exciting to see how these 2 colleges are able to assess the development of student soft skills in general. Alicia Crouch is on the call with us. She is the Vice Chancellor for ORPA and reviewed this document as well. I don't know if there are any questions from the document. It's not been our general practice across the colleges. As you know, we've worked more on standardized and really optimizing online course quality more than including soft skills into the curriculum at this point, although certainly they become part of the curriculum in specific discipline areas, but they're not necessarily part of the general overall online experience. So again, we're excited to see what ECTC and BCTC are able to do.
I do think it's an interesting area. As you said, there's not a whole lot of research out there. I tried to do a little on my own as well. But I do think with as many students as we do have moving to online courses, that this is going to be one of those areas that in the very near future, I think employers are going to start asking about as they see that there are deficits here. When students have the opportunity to sit in a classroom, show up on time, turn their things in on time, have that interaction not only with their peers, but with their educators as well, they pick up a lot of those soft skills. And I did have concern, and that's where this came from, as we're moving to ensuring quality in our online programming. I just wanted to know, and I appreciate the work that you all have done on this, the literature review that you've done is excellent, just to see what others are maybe doing and then how we can kind of springboard off of what little bit is out there. Maybe we become the first in the nation to really develop a program and then publish some of our data to help other community colleges across the nation. So I do appreciate you looking into this, and I'm excited as you are to see what E-Town and Bluegrass are going to be doing in the future with this. So along that same thread with the system-wide quality education programming, one of our big conversations in between these meetings has been about ensuring success for our students who are online. And I found it interesting in the information that was shared that we have a pretty good plan in place. We have, if you want to talk, Dr. Williams, about keys and how the online programming for course content and for classes that are done solely online, look at those metrics a little bit and how those essential standards are planned out. I think the plan is excellent. My question has been and continues to be, how are we closing the loop there to make sure that what we have as the plan is being followed by all instructors, professors, associates, et cetera, to make sure that those standards are being met in every course.
Thank you. So I'll just give a brief overview. The KCTCS Essential Standards, or keys, were developed by 4 faculty work groups working together and then coming up with work group recommendations that were accepted across all colleges as our rubric. They essentially follow the Blackboard essential quality standards. So it is a national or global standard for minimum qualifications for online courses. To Dr. Fletcher's point, some of our colleges apply them differently. Almost all of them apply them to new courses as they're being uploaded, or use the keys as they are maybe reviewing existing courses, but there is not one practice. We do not, for example, as a system, certify or badge classes that are brand new that are moved forward. So this is one area where we could look at possibly creating a system-wide plan to use the rubric in the same way at the colleges to review courses before they're loaded and made available to students. We do have some new dashboards. They came out in late March. They are in our DSS decision software that all colleges have access to at different levels based on their position. Within DSS, you can look at the success, i.e. students having a C or better in a course, the success rate for each class, each group of classes, each college, each type of student, and each type of offering, online, hybrid, or face-to-face. So colleges are learning how to use that dashboard to really understand where they may have gaps in performance. For example, across English classes or a particular math class, if there are large gaps between success rates overall, not by individual faculty, but overall between the same math class within an institution, or between the online version of the math class and the face-to-face, so that then they can look into it and take action. And I see Regent Witten has her hand up.
Yes, thanks, Chancellor Williams. I have a question about the accessibility, I guess, of the DSS data. General faculty do not have access to that. I mean, so we're talking about success rates of those particular courses, but we have to go through the IR process in order to get that. And that's also troublesome when we're talking about working on assessment plans and division plans. Program coordinators need that, and we don't have access. How would one go about getting that?
The access is determined at the college. It's, we don't control access here. This information I'm talking about has section numbers, for example, but not faculty names attached to it. It doesn't mean you couldn't go figure out what faculty member it was, but it's not currently attached. So if there's a role that requires access to the information, then that college can certainly make that available. But the question becomes, what's the role and what's the use of the access? You don't necessarily want every faculty member having access all the time to this data. So we do usually report it at some level where it is not necessarily, unless the individual college needs it. It's not, we wouldn't report it at the system level, for example, by faculty member or something else. But it's not, there's no denial. It's a college decision about who has access based on position.
Right. Thank you. And
It
even if
sounds
it
like there
does
may
make
be another.
Sorry, Wendy.
That's okay. It sounds like there may be another opportunity here for optimization of that dashboard to write some policy and procedure around that.
As we said, it's very new, so we're all sort of figuring out how to use it. And I don't want to say where the comfort level is, but where it can be maximized to be appropriate. It's a tool, like everything's a tool. You know, student evaluations are a tool, but they have their pros and cons. Faculty and colleague evaluations are a tool. Somebody externally reviewing a course against standards is again a tool. So each of these tools, you're right, we need a way to think about how best to use it. And you sort of start using it, and then sometimes that helps you figure out where you're going to go with it.
If I could add, I'm sure this is true probably for all of our colleges too, though. As part of the student success outcomes, we do primarily through our IEIR, like Alicia counterparts, because of the variances in the data, et cetera, they compile those DFW rates for all of the courses. So that information then is coordinated in through the academic councils and the dean's meetings, division meetings, et cetera. Is how we do it at our college.
So let me just continue. I'm sorry, go ahead, Regent Fletcher. I wasn't sure if there's something else you wanted to address.
Yeah, I'll hold my questions. Go ahead.
Really, the only other thing I was going to add is that one other approach that colleges have been taking and that we have supported somewhat through the system office is to use for adjuncts, particularly adjuncts coming in late and close to the beginning of the term, to have master courses that they can take, much like other institutions do, where they're given the course and they teach that course rather than having to develop something at the last minute. But it does standardize that offering for adjuncts who may not be prepared. We've been having these conversations in academic council about how best to make a framework where we can optimize the quality across the colleges, given that many of our students particularly take classes from different colleges, and the academic council is ready to work with faculty on addressing this. However, we need to move forward. So that's my report. Thank you.
Regent Whitten.
Yes, I have another question for the Chancellor, if you don't mind, Dr. Williams. So I'm very familiar with this. I mean, I've kind of been on the Ultra path, and of course we're switching to Ultra, of course, this summer. I know at Maysville it's going to be a requirement for this summer proceeding into fall. We're having a lot of issues. I'm also on the quality assurance group that's writing the plan that I know is going to be presented to your office within, I think, the next week and a half. Is that correct? Oh, you're muted, Dr. Williams.
I'm sorry. I think so, yes.
So I suppose my question is, because I feel like the timeline for this, I know we've known for quite some time that we're transitioning to Ultra, that these courses need to be meeting these minimum standards of the KEYS rubric. My problem is they're not. The quality assurance for these courses across, and it's not just, I always feel like people assume it's Maysville that I'm saying this about. It's not. It's across the system. That how are we measuring the quality of the product that we're giving to these students? I have seen some courses that have frankly scared me to think that these students are receiving not minimum standards. Let's just say it that way. I feel like, pushing this plan out to 2023, which is what my understanding is of this. Is that too late to wait? I mean, don't we need to be?
I'm sorry. We've got a couple different questions going on here. If it's determined that we need, to move forward immediately with a plan to review current courses and any new courses, That can come from system leadership, and then the colleges with the through the peer teams would implement. So I don't know about 2022 or 2023, but it still will take a little time to get things in place and ensure people are trained to if colleges don't have enough people trained to use the rubrics for review, it would take a little while. I think there are a lot of courses probably that got put up there during the pandemic that really do need to be strongly reviewed and examined. I see Dr. Zarapata has his hand up, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, just a real quick question. Would we envision those quality controls being reviewed at the local college, or would this be a regional thing, or would it be a centralized, or have we even thought that far?
So, Dr. Zarapata, I would like to see, and of course, this committee can make a recommendation and will make recommendations to the full board in June. But what I would like to see is that we advocate for some action on these items that we know are going to impact student success. And in my mind, a quality control program for online learning, especially when we have so many students moving in that direction or already there, is definitely something that I think could become a priority pretty quickly. I do have concern if the keys is already there, if that's already in progress or already in use, and there's already a way to evaluate whether or not those standards are in place, however that's currently being done, maybe just needs to be reviewed. But I guess my overall question, this committee is charged with efficiency. It feels very inefficient, at least at first glance to me, that we are doing it 16 different ways. Is this something that we could set a central policy about at the system level and then ask the colleges to implement, even if there are some nuances, individually with how they carry that out? It feels like it is something that should be more standardized to assure that throughout the system, these metrics are being utilized and these standards are being met. From a timeline perspective, I totally appreciate and would advocate for, work group development of faculty, of anyone else, the institutional research folks, whoever else needs to be involved, but to maybe get into the work of this pretty quickly so that this could be implemented by fall, if that's at all possible, especially if these are things that have already, if the keys are already being utilized, which is what I understand from Dr. Williams. They're already supposed to be meeting these rubrics for these, or these metrics for these online courses. What we're trying to do is put that quality piece in place to kind of, like I call it, close that loop to say, okay, we have a plan, we have the availability of these essential standards, but now see how those are being utilized. This are already finished. It's that evaluation or that reevaluation after the implementation that is really what's lacking here. And Dr. Linden, I do see your hand. I don't want you to think I'm ignoring you. Just give us just a second to finish this chain of thought here.
So, Dr. Zarapata, to your question, it should be done at the college level, but what the distance learning peer team has been discussing is whether one could then pull a sample from each college and have a team of faculty cross-college look at that, what has been reviewed at the college and see if they're all sort of in agreement to try and validate the process across the colleges. And to your point, Regent Fletcher, certainly we could create one practice that we then documented back to the system. That can happen, and we do have the basics of these rubrics. The process then becomes, at what point is the review? How is the review done by 1, 2, 3 other faculty, a division chair? What does it look like at the institution, so that we can more standardize that and then do some training to be sure that the rubric is being followed the same way at the same institution.
I also think there may be some question of inter-rater reliability when it comes to evaluating the courses. I did talk with a faculty member this week who told me that if two people evaluated that same course, that there could be a difference in how they scored that. And I think the example I was given was, maybe there's 113 points available or whatever in the standards. And if one person rates that course, they might get 105. And if another person did it, they might get a 95. So I think there's a little bit more work to be done on that side of just making sure that inter-rater reliability would be the same, especially if we're going to do this. And when you don't always have the same 2 or 3 people rating all of the courses. So, you want to be fair and you want to be consistent, but you want to ensure that quality all the way across as well. So, Dr. Linden, I'm sorry, I'm again not ignoring you, I promise.
Oh, no, that's fine. That I have not a whole lot to add to the conversation, but it's still along the same vein of thought. I do think there are some best practices across the colleges that we can take into account. Certainly at HCTC, we'd be happy to serve on a committee. We certify all of our faculty first to teach online, and then we have a quality assurance committee, and we review courses each semester. Now, certainly we haven't reviewed all of our courses yet, but we try to get at least 10 per semester reviewed, especially if we have a new instructor who's teaching online, to get their courses reviewed. And we have this, we go through the standards here that Dr. Williams presented, and we go through the rubric, and we have a check sheet here, and we go through whether they're meeting it, whether they're not. We give them feedback, so we have a whole process, and I'm sure other colleges use a similar type of check sheet or worksheet. So, but I think that our process is pretty solid, and we do give the instructor an opportunity to give feedback to the committee, and they work back and forth with the committee to make improvements. So we'd be happy to sit on a team and share what we do.
So when is that process being carried out, Dr. Linden?
We try to do that the semester prior to the implementation of the course, but sometimes it ends up being the first semester that the course is being taught.
And if you find deficiencies in the course or in the standards, are they immediately corrected, or is that course carried out till the end of the semester and then corrected the next one?
It depends upon what we find. If it's something that we feel needs immediate correction, it would be corrected immediately. If not, we would make some changes in the course design for the next semester.
Okay. And how often do you, just curious, how often do you find problems? Is that pretty uncommon, or?
I would have to check on that to give you some exact data, but no, I don't think that major concerns are found commonly, but certainly we have tweaks many times in how we might recommend that something be designed. And sometimes there's a little bit of back and forth too. The faculty person might say, I'm thinking of a particular instance just this semester, they might say, well, I don't know. Do I really need to change it in that way? And they'll have some discussion with the committee, because certainly we don't want to violate academic freedom, but we also want to make sure we're ADA compliant. We want to make sure that we're addressing any accessibility issues, that we're really making sure that the quality of the course is where it needs to be. So it can be interesting, some of the discussions we get into sometimes. But
yes, we definitely do not want to cross academic freedom boundaries, but ensure that the students are getting their money's worth in those courses, and that the faculty is able to present their information in a way that is agreeable. So thank you very much for that. Yes, I'd be very interested in seeing that check sheet. Do any of the other presidents on the call today or on the meeting today have a similar tool you're using, or want to share the process you're using? It's very insightful.
Yeah, I mean, with Gateway, we've been very fortunate. My predecessor put a lot of investments into online learning, and so we've been able to benefit from that. We've had, our teaching and learning center has really enhanced our ability to, not just in terms of online learning, but thinking about, learning that is student engaged. And then we have particular trainings and certifications of our folks to be able to teach online, to embed those qualities into their instructional model. And we're constantly reviewing and designing and developing effective course shells so that, as Dr. Williams says, adjuncts can take advantage of the work that we've done, and also to expand our capacity to offer online education that's of value. And we do a lot of work reviewing the quality in the assessments. And as Dr. Williams was saying as well, we're getting a much more detailed look at not just overall success rates, but looking at success rates related to first time in college students, as opposed to, Pell Grant students, as opposed to under-resourced students, and all those things. So I think that, again, we sometimes think of online learning as somehow something new to what we're doing. And really, in fact, it's not. It's instruction. I think that the challenge has been that we've been a little slow in coming to how to build instruction from the platform of an online learning experience, rather than basically creating a PDF version of our coursework. That's where I think a lot of the focus is going to be for KCTCS the next couple of years. And it might be good to have a kind of commitment statement that all 16 colleges will sign on to, saying our online instruction adheres to these qualities. And then our work then demonstrates that we're just as effective online as we are in our face-to-face. We've also got program reviews that deal with all the types of instruction that go on. So, every 5 years, a program goes through a major review with success rates, et cetera, and with responsibilities and accountabilities for improvement. So there's lots of things in place. So it may be a matter of categorizing so that the board is aware, as well as our community be able to understand what is the process by which we guarantee and constantly work on quality.
That is exactly what we're looking for. So thank you for that, for the explanation, as well as for those suggestions. We definitely will put an asterisk next to that. Hannah, I hope you captured that in the minutes. That's exactly what we're looking for, and streamlining that commitment as well as those goals across the system. So for those of you who are already doing this process, and Dr. Linden mentioned the check sheet, but since you're already collecting that data, would you be willing to go ahead and share that, at least within this committee, so that we can kind of get a look at the different tools that are being used across the system, and then what kind of responses you're getting and the corrections that are being made, so we can see if there are any common themes there that may, pull out, that data may pull out the need for a targeted continuing education or professional development for new faculty, for example, those sort of things. So no, that's awesome. Thank you for that. I see Regent Witten.
Yeah, sorry, just as a follow-up to Dr. Williams, after hearing Dr. Linden and Dr. Figueroa talk about their what sounds like excellent quality assurance programs at their institutions, do we have an idea of how many institutions across the system actually have those in place already?
Every college, as far as I know, does use the review, but I don't know that each one does it to the same. I can ask our online learning coordinator, Dr. Leah Simpson, but I don't have personal knowledge of the extent to which each one uses it. So that is something I can find out.
Okay, thank you.
So speaking of Dr. Simpson, she actually, I'm sorry, I'm trying to use multiple pieces of technology to pull up all my notes here.
She had written before to you, Regent Fletcher, that while, every college had this and had a process, she couldn't guarantee that it was being used the same way at institution.
Exactly.
But I don't know that we have a document that describes how each college is using it. So that's what I need to check with her to see. She made the statement, but I need to understand what the parameters of the statement by following up on what data she's using.
Okay, so would it be a fair assessment, and this is where I need the Regents to weigh in here, that out of this discussion that we would recommend a system-wide plan for evaluating the online courses beyond what already exists in the standards, and develop along with that policies and procedures to manage this, as well as recommend a timeline for such a plan.
Chair Fletcher, just a quick point of note. Did you say beyond the keys? Is that what you just said, or did you kind of cut in and out for me a little bit there?
I'm sorry, beyond what is already there with the keys, because it sounds like from what Chancellor Williams is saying is the keys is already in use. Everyone should already be meeting those standards. I'm talking about the follow-up evaluation piece.
How the college uses the standards and how those are then reported back in a quality process.
And collect the data on that as part of this project.
Okay,
Other comments or questions, Regent Whitten or Regent Green? Is Regent Cox, did he come on? I see another hand. Hang on. I can't get to that hand.
I believe that's Dr. Handy.
It's Dr.
That
Handy.
would be me.
Oh,
I
there
can
he
wait
is.
until-
And Regent
I can
Green.
wait until the regents have spoken.
Okay, Regent. Well, it's back and forth. Regent Green, do you have your hand up?
I do, and just getting back to the timeline, would that be a piece of what we're proposing and how we would implement that as well? I know at the last meeting, Dr. Williams brought some points out about, the timing of where we're at right now versus, we're moving into summer and fall and how that will affect faculty and the support staff and IR and things like that.
Yes, I would think the timeline would be part of any recommendation that we make to the board for the June meeting, and then let the board decide from there.
Regent Fletcher, I'd also just like to add, since there is a transition to Ultra, I think, a lot of folks, a lot of faculty, adjunct faculty are going to be learning this new software, this new LMS. So what kind of, I know that we would prefer it to be sooner rather than later, but applying all these new standards to a new learning management system is going to be tough. So I would just like for some consideration of faculty in there as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what would you recommend? Your boots on the ground out there. You tell us, Dr. Williams, Regent Whitten, other presidents, what do you all think is a reasonable timeline that's not going to put us out another year or 18 months to implement this?
So I would just like to speak to our plan at Maysville. I think it's a good one. I'm on the team. That's not the reason it's good. Trust me. I've got
excellent, I'm sure.
Very wonderful brains surrounding me. But we are looking at it in phases. So this first one has been a self-review, which it's going to move on to an ongoing reflection and revision and editing, and then a actual folks in your courses picking it apart per the rubric and the standards that we've even set for Maysville, which are going to be higher than what's even requested here. So, is that something that probably should be left up to the individual colleges, like within a certain frame? They know their faculty and staff better than we do. So I'm just kind of thinking, we're all in the same boat, we're rowing the same way. But just to have that autonomy a little bit to determine how they will roll that out. Just a question.
I think it's a very good question and a very fair question. I would like to see the policy around the entire process be a little more centralized and then implemented at the individual college level, if that's the direction that we think is the most reasonable.
This is Ty. I also think there are common courses that almost all of the colleges are teaching online. Call them gateway courses, many of those. And those are probably begging for a greater look at consistency in terms of the curriculum and what we're doing there. So it may not be that we set a rigid timeline for all courses, but that we identify courses next semester
faculty are off in the summer, so starting in the fall, that we're going to put through some sort of a challenge like this or a test. And when we take a bite that's manageable, and we pick courses that are common across the colleges. I do want to make one small caution because I think you know this, but I started my career as a president at Ivy Tech, and I spent 5 years in that system. And so I know a number of the people there. And this is one of the sorest points that I hear from my fellow chancellors, they're called chancellors in Indiana, not presidents, is that they centralized online education so much that now all the colleges view the central office as a student competitor, because if a student takes the course online, they're no longer a student. Even if they're from that region, they're no longer counted as a student at that region. And so there's active behind the scenes efforts to keep students from taking courses in a way that might be best for those students. And so I think it's an unintended consequence that certainly Ivy Tech didn't mean to create, but that we have to be careful that what we're looking for is a consistency from the colleges, not a unified distance education approach where the students are, for lack of a better phrase, system students, or they're part of an online university, or whatever you want to call it, that might create a competitive environment, which is how I understand from a couple of my colleagues, the boots on the ground at Ivy Tech feel is happening.
Yeah, and I think with us kind of swaying away from the single accreditation conversation, which is what really differentiates this from Ivy Tech, I believe, I would not see us having that. No one is going to be teaching classes or offering classes from the system office. We're just looking for the system to support the colleges with these standardized policies and procedures and quality metrics across the system.
Yeah, so, I think one of the things we find in this whole thing is as varied as 16 colleges are, when we're looking at online education, we've got thousands of variations in these courses. And so while we're all doing our best to try to document that good teaching practices are happening, it is faculty member and to some extent subject matter or programmatically dependent in terms of that. And what it really boils down to, in my opinion, is the courage to say this isn't going to cut it. And some areas are good at that. Some areas are not very effective at that. And I'm not sure, I want to be realistic here, I'm not sure layering this is going to help if we don't help the local colleges understand how to say, this isn't going to be taught again until it's fixed. And I think that it's in a minor, call it the 80-20 rule or the 90-10 rule. It's in a minority of courses, but it is present, and probably most of the colleges would acknowledge that we do have some of these issues that need to be addressed, but they're probably not college comprehensive issues. They're individual isolated situations.
Right, and go ahead. I'm sorry, Regent Fletcher, you were saying.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, it goes to the way that I've been kind of looking at this is like we are really like the federal government and the state governments, and a kind of constitutional convention or understanding, a policy from the Board of Regents that says here are the commitments we make to online education. Right. And then the procedures are colleges will demonstrate, through these factors. Then that leaves it to us to determine best how to address the goals that are being set by the regents. It also then strengthens really the primary goal, I think, of the regents is to express how Kentucky can be confident in what its 16 colleges in the system office are doing together. So, and again, it's one of those weird things that when we're talking about system and colleges and, that we sometimes confuse what the system, we sometimes think of the system office as a college, right? Like it's got to have policies and procedures that are related, but exactly right. So something which really has the nuance of here are the expectations, they're set out. We have Dr. Zarapata as our main employee to ensure that the presidents of those colleges are meeting those standards. And then it's working with the peer groups, it's working with the chancellor's office, it's working with all the other cabinet members to ensure that the colleges are best positioned to demonstrate the success of our work.
And the way that I see that, and you used government, which is always a terrible example in my opinion, but I really see it a little bit differently in that while we do have one employee, which is Dr. Zarapata, and I really see the Board of Regents part of our role as being very supportive for what is happening out there in the regions and being able to provide direction, policy, and procedure and vision to help you all and to support what you are doing out there. That really is just a huge part. And when you think more of that federal and state government example, it feels very top down and very pushed down. And that is not at all how I see this happening, especially with our current Board of Regents. We are really about supporting the system. And again, this committee optimizing those resources and trying to make sure that we are getting the best use of our resources, of our people, you know, whether that's human resources, facility resources, online education, whatever it is. We just want to make sure that we are shoring up the policies and the procedures at our level that will support what you all are doing out there. So I don't think anybody needs to, you know, be concerned in that capacity or feel the need to explain to us what our role is. I think the Board of Regents is pretty clear on that, and we are all out there, you know, trying to help do what we do to help you do what you do. So again, this should not come across for any reason as anything threatening or anything, you know, being dictated in any way. Again, we're looking for efficiencies to help make the system better, and the system cannot exist without those 16 colleges. So, yeah, I appreciate the comment, but I really want you all to see us in more of a supportive role, because that's how we see us.
Yeah, and so for the record, since it's being recorded, I just wanted to indicate I was not looking for a top down. I've seen it as in this way, and I've talked to Regent Damaris about this as well. And I also appreciate, I think, the way that Dr. Zarapata has talked about the system office giving lift.
Mm-hmm. I see it this way.
Yeah,
I see it like this.
good. I think
we are trying to support, you know, being good stewards of dollars, being good stewards of facilities, making sure that our people have equity and inclusion, and that diversity is a real thing and not something talked about across the system. Like, we are here to support those ideas and those ideals. And so, yeah, again, this is not a top-down thing at all. Dr. Zarapata, you've had your hand up so patiently. I'm going to call on you.
Thank you. I did have one comment, and one, you know, as we're triaging, you know, I know Dr. Handy talked about common courses across all colleges. I'd also want to prioritize online courses that don't perform near as well as their face-to-face counterparts. I think that's a big issue. That's something that we need to look into.
And that data is available. That's what I'm hearing from Dr. Williams, is in that dashboard, correct?
Yes.
So we should be able to fish that out pretty quickly. Now, who is able to get to that is the exact policy that I'm talking about. So again, an action item for this particular piece, and then we'll move on in the agenda. But so again, a system-wide plan. So a centralized plan for evaluating online courses, standardizing the process, identifying those key core curriculum courses and any that are not performing as well as their face-to-face counterparts as the priority. And then the second part of that, and I know that's like 3 parts in itself, but the next part of that would be to set the timeline or recommend a timeline for that plan to be implemented. And what I'm hearing very clearly from Regent Witten, as well as Chancellor Williams, is that this may need a little bit of time, especially with Ultra coming on board and everybody kind of getting up to speed with that. Do we think it's going to take more than a semester to get everyone up to speed with Ultra? Because maybe we say we're going to push for this by January of 23, or are we saying we're really looking at fall of 23 in the academic year 23-24?
So Regent Witten may disagree with me, but as faculty are moving their courses to Ultra, those that have not done so, and a fair number have already moved, They should be using those essential standards to make sure that they're meeting a lot of those basic requirements. Ultra was set up so that there is a more consistent template, not what the faculty members enter, but the way in which a student would see things ordered. It's just an order. It makes it more ADA compliant. So I do see Regent Witten's point, and I do want folks to be comfortable, but as they're creating, many of the practices in the rubric are more around the services and support than how you actually enter your curriculum. And so I would hope that what we could do would be to draft, taking all the policies that each college already has and finding the commonalities, that we could draft a process, draft a timeline. As faculty come back in August and the Senate starts meeting, we could have the conversations with faculty about, here's the draft based on, what we see that the colleges already do, and understanding that you're having, many of you are having to move your courses into a different format. That we could perhaps start reviewing those gateway courses, and it might be 3 of them. It might be a math and English and a science or something, but 3 common gateway courses that, to Dr. Zarapata's point, show the largest difference in quality, in student success rates between face-to-face and online, and then use that as kind of a pilot into January, and then, return and review and see what needs to be changed or what kind of reporting we're getting back, so that we could then really start in a more wholesale manner. It's not a timeline, I think, that the Regents see as a business timeline, but it is a timeline that allows for faculty input. And that's, really the most important part, is that faculty have their input and understand the rationale, the process, and the data that's being used. There's, this, as I've told you, Regent Fletcher, this dashboard is really new. Many faculty may not even be aware that it is now available as a tool. And so there's, there's conversations that need to go on around that too, as faculty come back in August. So with that, Regent Witten, I know you have your hand up and you may want to respond to that.
So on the dashboard conversation, as you said, they may not even know it's out there. Is there a plan to do an update, maybe from the system or from each of the presidents, to let the faculty know that that dashboard is out there, to let them know that is a resource or a tool for them to be able to take a look at as far as their own courses? Like, how are we going to use that dashboard in a meaningful way, and not just for a particular performance improvement plan for a particular faculty member, for example?
Chair Fletcher, one of the things, most faculty have already had their last Senate meeting, their local faculty assembly meetings or Senate meetings. Most faculty have, depending on where they are and the grading process and finals, they're, walking out the door. Our small quality assurance team just found out about it from our provost. So the rest of the faculty is unaware of this. So, Dr. Williams, you're going to be probably surprised that I actually do agree with you. My biggest thing is of course, not just only the protection of faculty and the pens, so to speak, staying in the writer's hand, which is the person who's designing that course, the faculty member. But I also would like to talk about, Dr. Zarapata, you mentioned, this idea of, checking these courses from a system perspective or system level. I think that we also have to make sure that we know that the faculty know that it's not punitive. And that kind of goes back to this idea of Dr. Figueroa talking about teaching and learning, and Dr. Linden talking about the rubric that they have. There are many colleges that do not have that option. We don't have a teaching and learning center. We would love to have one. Can we have a system teaching and learning center? I know we've got great supports for Blackboard and training and boot camps and all of the things that are accessible, but a true teaching and learning center, maybe we can vision it online, but there should be ways for our rural colleges to access those things when we don't have the funds to actually have them on campus. That's just a support that could go with what Regent Fletcher was talking about as far as what our recommendation would be.
So we have 2 parts of the Chancellor's office that do professional development. That includes the Office for OPDI, Professional Development and Innovation, which does a lot around teaching. And then obviously the Office for Online Learning, which does a lot about instructional design and teaching, but primarily in the online. And then Technology Solutions has a group that teaches to the technology. So if you're having a technology issue. So really it's the OPDI piece that speaks to the teaching, and that is a lot of that is sort of managed by the professional development peer team, the kinds of sessions that are done and what's needed. So what we've been trying to do internally is put their offerings together in one location so that faculty, rather than having sort of 3 different ways, you have to find information trying to put them together. But it's also a small group. We have a lot of funding to teach technical faculty, but not as much to teach general education faculty. So that's certainly a conversation we can have. I think the dilemma here is that, we've spread from how do we do quality to all of the things that wrap quality. And maybe by drafting this plan, we can look at how all these pieces, professional development, helping faculty understand data that's now available, all of the pieces wrapped together into this plan, including the policy around who can get access to the data and how it's given to them. So there's a lot of work to be done in sort of the draft phase over the summer so that as faculty come back in the fall, we have the opportunity to really start having those conversations and have something on paper that they can review and then react to, rather than, trying to sort of go in all the directions, pulling it in. We can start with something and move out from there into the next iteration.
Dr. Williams, I'd also like to, and I know they're going to be on vacation as well, but especially Council CRC and Rules, I would like to see if they would be willing to be a part of this so that we can definitely say with 100% that we have brought faculty leadership into this. I think that's really beneficial.
You know that we do a large, as you know, we do a large orientation, but we also send out emails and information over the summer. We have, we're still receiving who the new senators might be at different colleges. That reporting's continuing to come in, but we can certainly keep them aware via email over the summer and then have a good discussion about it at the orientation.
Thank you.
Regent Fletcher?
I think that we have frozen.
I'm sorry, Regent Fletcher, you're breaking up.
I said, I think I have frozen. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Thank you.
Okay. The last thing I heard was we were waiting to hear who the new senators may be.
I just said that then as we get the collection of new senators and continuing senators, we can certainly work with them at least via email over the summer. And then we have a large Senate Council orientation for over 100 senators in early August before classes start. And we can start having those conversations at that time.
Okay, so again, to implement any of this, are we looking at 23, 24? Can we say that by July of 23, we would have the plan ready to be put in place? Is that a reasonable timeline?
Yes, I would be hopeful that we would start piloting prior to the January 2023 session. So a full plan could be certainly in place by the end of the year for the following academic year. Is that what you're asking?
Yes. Yes.
I think that's agreeable.
Okay. Anyone else have any other discussion on the system-wide quality education programming plan? I don't see any other hands. Dr. Zarapata?
Yes.
Oh, there you are. I thought maybe I'd frozen again. Are you okay with this? Do you have any concerns or anything that you would want this committee to consider further?
No, I appreciate the discussion. I've got no concern.
Okay, so we're going to move on. So also in our old business, and I'm looking at the agenda here. Advising for student success online. Dr. Williams, do you have anything on this topic?
I do not at this point. We're moving forward several new advising initiatives, including an advising peer team, which makes sure that we're communicating equally across all the colleges around advising best practices. But I do not have any additional information at this time.
Are we using any kind of predictive analytics to focus student advising at this point?
We use a product called Civitas, which allows us to do a fair amount of predictive analytics on specific populations. For example, you can look to see who might be at risk by population type. You can predict based on, for example, when a student registers, how well they might do, and then try to move that student so they're registering at a time that makes sense to them. There are a number of different uses for that. We also use a program called Starfish, which is an early alert system that isn't so much predictive analytics as provides faculty the opportunity to give students early feedback in any class, both flags, you're having problems and I'm going to hand you over to this support structure or suggest that you do this. And then kudos, really, really proud of you. You're doing great in your class right now. But we do have access to both, yes.
Okay. Okay, so credential comparison, and I do think that you do have some information for us on this, correct, Dr. Williams?
I did share just a short description of the Regent Fletcher had asked about any differences in credentials between Ivy Tech and KCTCS. This is a short overview of the fact that essentially, although we call them slightly different names, we do offer the same kinds of credentials, those for transfer, those applied science, and then the only real difference, the only real difference is that we call something a diploma and they call it a technical certificate. I believe the reason, Regent Fletcher, if I'm maybe speaking for you, that you were interested in asking that question is because in the benchmarking KCTCS to Ivy Tech document, which may or may not be in your materials, we look at the graduation and completion number of credentials awarded by public two-year institutions. And we award 2.0 credentials per graduate to Ivy Tech's 1.4 credentials per graduate. And so it was important that we be able to say that our reporting structure and our credentials are equivalent.
Beyond that, my question about credentials was, what do we define as a credential? And when we talked a couple of years ago, we had a big conversation in one of the board meetings about stacking credentials, but all of those credentials are meant to just move that student along to earn a degree, correct? So yes. When we're counting credentials, and I know Alicia Crouch has said a few times, we're no longer duplicating head counts when it comes to credentials. So one student with 2 credentials is still a 1, not a 2, for example. Am I correct in that?
Alicia, do you want to speak to that? Because I think that's maybe slightly different.
Sure. So we do report it both ways. So we report unduplicated numbers of graduates as well as the total duplicated number of credentials awarded.
So the credentials, if a student did earn a associate and a certificate, both would be reported, but the student would be reported as 1 graduate, right? So 2 credentials, 1 graduate?
That is correct.
Okay. So I know I got a little bit of feedback from some folks who said, yes, we're awarding more credentials than an Ivy Tech, for example. I guess the ultimate question there is, are those credentials then leading to jobs in situations that are not employer-specific credentials? Ultimately, our goal is to award those degrees or to award, and then to transfer, for those students to be able to transfer to the 4 years or to enter the workforce with those degrees. So I was just a little bit curious. I actually had a legislator who asked me the question and I couldn't answer it. Do we award a credential for something like a CPR certification? Are we calling, you know, a 4-hour workshop a credential? So
that would be no. A
Right.
certificate, you know, the shortest term certificate that we have is our state registered nurse aid credential, which is 3 credit hours or 45 contact hours of instruction. And as you know, it's really more than that because it includes some clinical site time. They then pass the state certification because they can't practice without that. And then, well, they can practice for 5 months and get it. And then they, but that does lead to a direct job. That is our shortest credential. But it does meet that number of credit hours. We then have a number of stackable credentials. So they could take that course, for example, then they maybe could take phlebotomist, which is a 9 credit hour course that again leads to a certification where they could go directly to work. They could take both of those and move them into an associate in applied science and health technology, and those would count towards that associate in applied science degree, but that is what we're calling a stackable credential. You might start with a certificate and then take another one. In an automotive program, for example, you might get an ASE certification along the way. That ASE certification by itself doesn't do anything necessarily because it might be around brakes or it might be around a hydraulic system or something else. But then it does stack together with other ASE certifications, again, attached to credit courses within a more full credential, and the whole package then can go to work, you know, for that individual.
And so when we're advising students on these credentials, are all of these within the course catalog under a particular diploma, degree? Like how are we advising students who maybe come in and say, I'm not really sure what I want to do, but I want to take some hours in this or in that? How does that process work? And are we sure that we are efficient and timely in getting those students into the courses that will ultimately lead to that degree?
I would say that we are, but I would suggest that your 4 presidents might be able to speak to the experiences at their college.
I see Dr. Handy.
Yes, so what I wanted to sort of point out is that while we do make a concerted effort for our credentials to be stackable, that is, as a student progresses, especially through a technical degree, as they reach certain milestones, I think the litmus test is industry recognized or nationally recognized sort of certificates. We want to award those, and we've doubled down on that over the last, I've been here 7 years now. I'd say we've really increased our emphasis on doing that. But it's not always so that it leads directly to degree. In fact, I would suggest that sometimes we're awarding these certificates and it leads to employment and does not ever get them to degree, or it slows down their degree attainment. So we usually calculate our graduation rate based on a 3-year cycle in terms of whether or not, within 3 years they've earned a 2-year degree. Some of these certificates are employable enough certificates that you're taking full-time students when you award these certificates, and industry is picking them up, and it may take them longer than 3 years to complete their degree. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't offer these certificates. That's a win for the student. They're gainfully employed and doing well, but I want to be careful about sort of stating that all of our certificates lead to a degree. I don't think that really isn't the case. Although we do try to make them as stackable as possible. We also know from research at both the 2-year and 4-year colleges that life gets in the way, and a certain proportion of our students who could be successful are not going to be. And by putting these certificates in their hands along the way, we increase their opportunity for good employment chances. But I think we design our curriculums, our certificates around what's recognized by industry and nationally. And I'm aware of university programs that'll bundle 3 courses together in accounting and give you an accounting certificate because they think it's worth giving. We're not engaging in that sort of behavior.
I would quickly add to that as well that I think certainly in the last probably 4 or 5 years, with a heavy emphasis on the high wage, high demand, I think that has certainly informed the push having more stackable certificates along those pathways. And certainly advising is the core, I think, to your question. And so, again, pretty sure across our colleges, that is really then all about how we continue to clearly keeping the student in mind. You know, let me back up even one more. When I arrived in 2016 and learned about the the HST pathway as an example, you know, we had hundreds of students trying to get into nursing who would not get into nursing, who would basically drop out for all practical purposes and would not be gainfully employed. With that HST pathway, as mentioned, there are so many opportunities for students to take a certificate, pursue a job. If that doesn't work out, they could keep stacking and stacking. That increases the marketability. To me, that's good efficiency and stewardship that a student within a fairly short defined period of time can maximize the skill sets, because, by the way, students do change their minds, which is another part of the challenge as well, too, right? So I think it's holistic.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, and one that I think in the whole conversation about advising is very well taken. Students sometimes don't know what they want, but sometimes they come in with a very clear idea of what they want and then feel like they never actually get there, or that they are delayed in getting there because they did not get advising or get good advising. And I guess my question around this is, how are we measuring student success in relation to advising? Are we also tracking metrics for how many, for example, you know, how often are they talking to an academic advisor? Do we track that kind of data to see those who are getting advising, seeing advisors on a regular basis? Are they graduating on time with the degree that they intended to get? You know, I'm looking for data to support our processes. I have personally talked to students who have said, I've never, you know, spoken with an advisor after I got admitted to the school. I've had faculty people to say, we are giving a certificate and this is probably a terrible example, but 5 courses in a business degree, we're calling a business certificate, and that doesn't mean anything to anyone outside of our system. Does that mean anything to the student other than, okay, you're this far along and now we can stack this with some further courses to get you to that degree? So again, looking for the most efficient, most effective way to ensure those students are being advised, and that we are targeting those high risk population, you know, students, and that we are being fair and equitable with our advising across the system as well. This is it's like the last one, a very big, very confounding problem that has lots of angles to consider. So again, how are we assuring that our students are being advised for success?
So I know Dr. Linden has her hand up, but I do want to point out that we've had 2 recent reports that speak to the success of our students in terms of CPE just did a report, early economic return on higher education investment. So that's the, you know, what the student earned and then how well they're doing in the workplace. And the KY Stats has a new dashboard with the new key performance indicator on transfer employment rates of graduates at the certificate, diploma, and associate. Right now, we have probably internal data sources where we could tie advising potentially to outcomes using that Starfish software that I spoke to earlier, where faculty are interacting with students. We'd have to go back and look and see what data we have and whether we could tie that to advising reports. We do have past data, I believe, through the SESI that students speak to advising, but we don't. All our students are attached to advisors as they come to the institution, either centralized advising or faculty advisors, depending on where they are in their process. It is a research study we could do, but it's not something we would have anytime soon. We'd have a fair amount of figuring out where to attach to those different data sources and how to pull them together. And I apologize for stepping over Dr. Linden here.
That's okay. I do see Dr. Linden's hand up.
Thank you, and no problem at all. I had a few points I wanted to add, and yes, we have tried at Hazard, as probably other colleges as well, to tackle advising and quality of advising in a number of different ways, from having all faculty doing advising to having assigned staff advisors in an advising center to having some kind of combination approach where you have entering students have a staff advisor and then they are assigned a faculty advisor in their program, and there's kind of what we would call a soft handoff, if you will. So we've tried a number of ways. We used to have, and I say used to, we still have an advising evaluation that we do. I'm not sure how consistent we have been with it throughout COVID, but I do have that, and I would be happy to share that. But it does address points like, is your advisor contacting you? Are they talking with you about a career pathway? Are they doing more than just giving you your schedule? Are they easily accessible when you need them? So it addressed some of those things, and I'd be happy to share that as well as past data. Again, not sure if we have the most accurate data throughout COVID, but I do have that, so I wanted to mention that. And we do train our advisors, and we also train them to look at that catalog, and certainly the certificates are lined up beneath the degree, so maybe they start the student out in a certificate, but they eventually end up getting that degree, which we always hope. But sometimes we have students who come in and like we spoke about, they know what they want. They know they want that truck driving certificate and they want to go to work right after that, or they know they want that EMT certificate and then they'll go to work after that. So sometimes there are very valuable certificates that lead to the workplace without them ever seeking that degree. Maybe they'll come back one day and then follow along the pathway, but many times we know they find viable employment with just that certificate. But we try to link it to the degree wherever possible.
And if we are improving their lives through gainful employment, isn't that our mission? Isn't that what we say that we are here to do, right? So I see Regent Damaris has checked in with us, and I see her hand up.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, it took me a few minutes to get in. Dr. Zarapata knows I'm having some troubles with my laptop and Teams, so I'm on my phone. I first want to congratulate everybody for all of the discussion I've heard thus far. It's been absolutely amazing to me to hear the discussion and to hear the input directly from the presidents and also obviously from you, Dr. Williams. And so I'm just I'm honestly absolutely thrilled just hearing all of this and hearing all of the comments around this is what we're doing, but here's how we can do it better. I think that is really the premise in which this committee was formed. And I hope that we always continue not only the committee's work, but the conversation. I guess the only thing I would add to this particular topic is I recall, and this was several years back now, but I recall a presentation from Alicia about the amount of credits that students were graduating with. And it was somewhat shocking to me that, I and I understand each program is a little bit different, and there are some programs or some degrees that require more than 60 credits. Particularly some of those degrees that may be transferred to an engineering bachelor's at UK or something like that. They might require somewhere upwards of 70 credits. But what was shocking to me was how many students were literally what I consider to be piled on with, 78 credits, 80 credits, 83 credits. And, my simple mind says this is a 2-year school. Why aren't we graduating people with 62 credits? And I know it's been a problem in the university nationwide, in the university realm as well, that it seems like, years ago when I graduated with a bachelor's degree, all I needed was 120 credits. And people are graduating with 140, 150 plus credits. And just, it's just very concerning to me. So I would ask that as we take a look at the quality of advising, the amount of stackables people are getting, that we keep in mind that we don't want students taking courses for the sake of taking courses. We're not in the business of just, being this sort of, let's just have them keep paying for stuff so that we can make more money, because that's not what we're doing. So I know that everybody would agree with that statement. That is not why we're here. But I wonder if there's a way through the quality assessment process that we really take a hard look at whether it's advising or whether it's how we are organizing stackable certificates or organizing our degrees, to make sure that people are not wasting their money and their time in classes that, they don't really need, either from a transfer perspective or from a degree perspective.
Another opportunity, and I'm sure, so with first year seminar type courses, is advising a big part of that as well? It's more of a group advising, but I mean, are we using those first year experiences, to talk to students about credit accumulation, about degree attainment? I know we're talking to them about study skills and time management and just general academic achievement in college, but those first year seminars may be a really excellent way for students to get another layer of that support. So I know in those courses, those things are probably being, talked about, but maybe we could even target more in those areas. I see Ty. I'm sorry, Dr. Handy.
Sure. So I just want to point out that there was in my opinion, it was a very substantial change in federal financial aid a few years ago. It really makes a big difference in this area. And you may not be totally aware of it, in that if a course is being offered, if a student takes a course that is not a direct part of their degree program, their intended major, financial aid will not help pay for that course. And that was not the case a while back. So my undergraduate degree had 132 required credit hours in it. Today, that degree is 120 or what have you. It actually has gotten much better. I majored in finance at WKU. But I also know that we have now, advising has become particularly important because there are financial aid dollars at stake if advising is done poorly. So I think the federal government has recognized this, and when you tie it to the aid dollars that a student has to pay tuition, it's a very strong policing model to keep some of this from happening. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have students who say, I'm at college and I've got a chance to take this course or that course, and I'm going to do it. That's their, we're not going to tell them not to do that. But our ability to recruit students into courses that are not part of their major is very limited by our financial aid guidelines. Not that we're trying to do that.
Right. Well, thank you for that. And yes, I believe that everyone on this particular meeting is aware of that. That may be a point to make to the full board in case someone on the board is not aware. But and then I do see a comment from Dr. Zarapata that there is technology in place that lets the students know if their course is not going to be covered by financial aid. So that's a very good thing to know, for us to know. So Dr. Williams.
If I can just add that thanks to the magic of Orpa and Alicia, I can tell you that over the past 4 years, we have gone from understanding that our average course is 60 credit hours to graduate, but our nursing is actually at 72. So we have some variance in there. We have moved from 84.4 credit hours per graduate or per student to 76.3. So while it doesn't seem like much, that's actually dropped. Many of our students do move, as I believe one of the presidents said earlier, they start out in early childhood and, then move to business or something, and they do accumulate some extra credits there. But it is a target for our colleges, and I'm very proud that they are moving it in the right direction.
Thank you for that. So it sounds like advising for student success is something that we can kind of take off of our radar. It sounds like it is being done. The only thing that I would ask is that we do track some data as far as student success, or perhaps those students who aren't successful, and trying to figure out if advising is any part of that. So we can talk about how to do that further at another time. Okay, at this point, if no one else has anything else to add to that discussion, I would like to move on to our new business. We've already been here for about an hour and 20 minutes or so. So I do want to be respectful of your time this evening and get everybody home before dark. But let's move on to the next item on our agenda, which moves us into our new business. And this has to do with our diversity, equity, and inclusion and the CPE plans and system uniformity. I do believe Dr. Williams and her staff are going to present some data and start this discussion for us. So thank you very much, Dr. Williams, for your work on this.
I want to thank Dr. Natalie Gibson, who's been leading this process for KCTCS. All our colleges are mandated through the Council on Post-Secondary Education to create diversity plans. And each plan is different based on the community's diversity, the community's needs, the college itself. And so what Dr. Gibson's prepared for you is an overview that summarizes college practices in the 3 areas of opportunity, success, and impact as prescribed by the Council on Post-Secondary Education. Dr. Gibson is on the screen, and she can give you either some highlights or she welcomes questions, however you'd like to move that forward.
I'm fine with her to go through the data and just kind of present, and then we'll take questions.
Thank you. Dr. Gibson?
Thank you, Dr. Williams, Dr. Fletcher, and Regent Fletcher, as well as everyone else who's on the call. I just want to reemphasize that the context for this presentation or this summary that I've pulled together really does rest in the requirements that all public institutions of higher learning in Kentucky are required to via the Kentucky Public Post-Secondary Education Policy for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, which was adopted by the CPE board in 2016. It does require each institution to develop, implement, and assess a diversity plan. And as Dr. Williams alluded to, each of those plans is different. However, I guess the organizing principle around those plans does fall into the policy that we just described, which is around opportunity, which is about student access. Success is about retention, persistence, credentialing, and graduation, as well as impact, which is really about trying to transform the climate or environment on each of our campuses in such a way that students and employees will have an opportunity to bring their full self to the campus, that they will feel like they are welcome, like they belong, and can contribute to the success of the institution, as well as to the success of for students. So the presentation really is broken into what I would call 5 big areas, broad areas. We have the quantitative story, which essentially helps us understand how our colleges have been performing in terms of diversifying their student enrollment, in terms of underrepresented minority students. We also wanted to take a look at underrepresented minority representation in campus leadership. We also looked at instructional FTE amongst those individuals who self-identify as underrepresented minority. The data that we are presenting here is from the 2021 assessment, which all colleges submitted in March of this year. So we are taking a look back in terms of the data. Also, what you see on this chart is the service area demographics, which would be again a percent of the population that self-identify as underrepresented minority. The source of this data that you're looking at is from the CPE Diversity Workbook. We thought that it would be really important to align the presentation and the data back to CPE, since ultimately they are the deciders, if you will, in terms of our assessment. The demographic information that you see is from the census, and so that's just to help you understand the source. A definition that would be important for you to understand as we think about underrepresented minority, we are talking about individuals, again, who self-identify as African American, American Indian, Alaska Native, Hispanic or Latinx, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, and 2 or more races. So just some points that I would like to pull from the quantitative story. When you look at our student enrollment, you can see that most of our colleges, most all of them, are on par with or slightly above in terms of their enrollment, slightly above what the regional demographic would be. When you look at campus leadership, which could also be managers or executives, we have most of our colleges, once again, about 11 of them that are meeting the local service region in terms of the demographic. And then finally, our real big opportunity for employment would be around the instructional FTE. As you can look at the data, it's clear that only really one of our colleges right now is meeting the expectation, which would be to at least be equal to the student enrollment for underrepresented minority, and that would be Hazard Community and Technical College. The next thing that we wanted to share in this summary with you is just kind of, let's go behind the numbers and let's talk a little bit about the story. What are our colleges doing in order to have these kinds of outcomes? So we presented to you just at a very high level some of the, I guess we created an inventory, if you will, of the strategies from the 2021 diversity assessment reports, and wanted to talk about what is it that all of our colleges are doing, but then also to point out some special strategies that maybe only a handful of our colleges are doing. So I'll just point out a few things under opportunity. All of our colleges are absolutely partnering with local area high schools and community organizations to not only understand the local needs and develop plans, but in order to recruit underrepresented minority students as well as low-income students per the policy. Another thing to point out is that many of our colleges expressed in their plans that they had migrated to the intentional use of various technologies as a result of COVID so that they could continue to provide virtual contact with prospective students and applicants in order to market our programs and services in support of enrollment. In terms of success, one of the areas that I would like to point out again is that all 16 colleges do emphasize the use of advising, career counseling, and mentoring services. We sort of just talked about that to help students remain enrolled. And then one of the strategies that seems to be emerging amongst our colleges is really about the increased incidence of active learning instructional techniques. In the literature, it is very clear that these techniques are a community best practice and that they result in higher levels of student engagement, hence success among all students, but particularly those from underrepresented, minoritized backgrounds. Under the policy block of impact, the one thing that I wanted to point out here is that while we still have a lot of opportunity for colleges to improve their faculty diversity, all of our colleges express a desire, aspiration to improve their diversity. They do provide lots of training and learning opportunities to promote the value of diversity and to improve cultural competence among employees as well as our students. But in terms of some opportunities that our colleges are taking, the one that sort of resonated with me is happening at 3 of our colleges where they are beginning to grow their own faculty by hiring adjunct faculty and promoting them into full faculty positions. The next section think I've already kind of gone over that. It's just a background about the policy. And then section number 5, if we can just scroll, section number 4, which is around the future opportunities that our colleges face, is that we do have the new strategic plan that the board has recently approved. It will include and infuse priority of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The way that we expect for that to manifest is that we will be, to the extent possible, disaggregating our metrics and targets so that we have a thorough understanding about what is happening beneath the big strategic number, or KPI, if you will, so that we can make adjustments to our practice to ensure that our students are successful or can be successful, and that our employees also have those same opportunities. One of the big things that we learned through our Grow Enrollment Together initiative this past fall and into the spring is from Alicia's team, and the use of the GIS application, the award-winning GIS application, is that the Hispanic population in the state of Kentucky is growing, is accelerating. I think nationally, Kentucky probably ranks number 4 or number 5 in terms of the rate of growth amongst the Latino population. And we see that evidenced by 119 out of 120 counties, growth is occurring amongst this population in 119 of those counties. This information has been shared with all of our colleges, and I'm pleased to report that even though it's very early on in our enrollment, our quest to build enrollments for fall of 22, we are seeing significant growth of the Latino population. It's actually maybe double the growth that we've seen for the overall population. A couple of other things that are going on across the system. We are going to be conducting some Courageous Dialogue facilitator training. That will occur next Thursday, actually. We have 100 staff and faculty members from all 16 colleges and the system office that will be participating in these trainings. And this work is built upon work from Dr. Glenn Singleton, who many years ago set forth this notion that if we are going to make for transformation and in terms of race and equity and diversity, then it really is based on our ability to have the conversations. That is where transformation and change can occur. We also believe that this capacity that we're going to be developing across our system may have the opportunity to help us deal with some other topics and other sacred cows maybe that we need to talk about in order to transform and continue to move forward and renew. Because we believe there are probably faculty members, I think someone said earlier today, Regent Witten said that many of our faculty are already gone. So we are going to host a session during the fall of 22, and those dates have yet to be determined. At the conclusion of these trainings, there is an expectation that we will create some sort of mechanism for the facilitators that emerge to offer these courageous conversations, be it at their college or maybe in their local community, and perhaps they could even become work with other colleges, just because sometimes it's difficult to be a champion in your own land. You have to have someone else come in to help you. The final piece that I would share is we are in the process of working system-wide at the system office with a core team, as well as with college representation, to begin to create policy and procedure, as well as data collection processes to support QIA population. Our intent is to help them identify a preferred name, to assign their pronouns, and then also to identify themselves from a gender perspective. We will be launching that in the fall of 22, and we think that we will be beginning that with training and education, so that in fact we have the system in place, so that once we start these processes, we'll have architecture and in place with our faculty and staff to be able to serve as guides to individuals. who choose to take advantage of those opportunities. The final thing in the presentation is just a set of definitions that I thought was really important. Probably should have started with those first, but it really just is to help us all be on the same page in terms of our work. So I'll stop there. And
Dr. Gibson, Dr.
Yes.
Gibson, this is Paul. Chair Damaris has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see that. Chair Damaris, I'm so sorry. What was your
No,
question?
that's fine. I was happy to wait for you to complete
Okay.
your presentation. Are you finished? I don't want to interrupt you.
I am done.
Okay. First of all, really happy to see that you are making some headway in LGBTQIA, because that was sparking to mind right away as you were going through the presentation, that is another aspect that we need to make some headway on. You know, when I think about DEI, I don't limit it necessarily to a race discussion. And I think that there are elements of diversity that we need to make sure that we are considering across an entire spectrum. So very happy to hear that you've got some emerging data on Hispanic population. And I think that we need to include that as part of our goals in terms of underrepresented minorities. I do think LGBTQIA is extremely important, and we need to be inclusive of that as well. There's a couple other areas, I don't know if they necessarily fall within the way you slice and dice the data, that I think are still out there. And I'll go all the way back to, you know, discussions that happened in maybe the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. And that was the basic discussion of gender.
Yes.
And making sure that we are, in fact, being equitable relative to male versus female from a gender perspective, regardless of race, ethnicity, or any other categorization, particularly as we look at management ranks across the system. And then another slice of the pie that I'm very interested in is any of our degrees or diplomas or certificates that are of technical nature. I'd like to see how well we're doing with representing females in STEM-related topics. You know, I can tell you from personal experience, in 1983, 84, I was one of 2 women sitting in a computer programming class of maybe 40 people. And at the end of the semester, I was probably one of 1 women who actually completed the course, because I still think we have issues where women are not adequately represented in STEM related fields. And so I would hope that we can continue to focus on that particular diversity factor as well. I want to congratulate Dr. Figueroa for yesterday. He had an excellent presentation at a community event where the first woman shuttle astronaut presented to the group. And of course, that was one of the things she talked about. You know, it was not common for women to go say, I want to be an astronaut, and then actually go on to become one. So I would hope that perhaps we could include a few more slices into the DEI definition and gather some more of that data if at all possible.
And so I guess my response to that would be absolutely. We are in the process of examining some data around male students. It appears that men have walked away and have really been doing it for a while now, away from higher education. We are particularly looking at male students of color, just to be candid. We see lower retention, we see lower graduation rates. And so we are looking at that and maybe trying to create some sort of a pipeline for one of our local. We have to start with a pilot, and you can't just scale it. You can't start big. Sometimes you have to start small. So starting with one of our local area high schools, and trying to create a pipeline from that high school to Bluegrass Community and Technical College, using it just as a pilot to get started with the idea that we would scale that at some point. We would be tapping into some of the other programs that our colleges are offering that really do focus on male student success, access and success. With regard to the gender issue and technical participation, I think that CPE just recently put out a graphic that sort of talked about that and how in some ways the participation is still fairly stereotypical, i.e., if I am a male, I probably am less likely to be in nursing, although my son is. But if I am a female, I may be less likely to be a line person, if that makes sense. So there was some data out there, and there are opportunities for us to take a closer look at that. I think some of the dashboards that Alicia Crouch and her team are putting together are going to perhaps allow us to be able to dig a little bit deeper into these gender issues that you're bringing up.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure. Regent Green, I see your hand.
Dr. Gibson, thank you for your presentation. Appreciate that today. You made a comment about there were 3 colleges who are utilizing adjuncts and moving them into full-time faculty positions. And I was just curious if you knew which colleges those were. I would be interested to reach out to them and see what they're doing.
Okay, well, let's see. Actually, from the reporting, it says that Somerset is one of the colleges, along with Jefferson and Big Sandy.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And Regent Green, are you at Somerset?
Yes, I am.
Were you aware of that data?
I was not aware of that data. I know we are, we're constantly looking for ways. We're working with our DEI person, Elaine Wilson. We're constantly working with her and looking for ways that we can attract and retain, diverse candidates, certainly in the faculty field. So I was just interested to see what other colleges were doing that, and I'm glad to hear that we're a part of that. So thank you.
Regent Whitten.
Thank you. Dr. Gibson, I would also like to just say thank you so much for your presentation. And I'd also like to give Dr. Linden kudos. I mean, the numbers, looking at those and seeing her on the plus side of the right side, I guess would be the way to say it. I do have questions about that data. I'm the one who had the 11th hour question about where these came from and how we're defining, for example, gonna point my finger at my folks again. They're gonna haul me off, I think. But we're looking at the 8.5% student enrollment with underrepresented minorities at Maysville, and then a campus leadership number of 9.5.
Mm-hmm.
Seems excessively high. So I'm just curious as to where, just knowing my own personal college. So that just made me want to say, where is the information coming from? And I believe Hannah sent something out on my behalf, being the late one to the party. But there was a definition of management according to IPEDS. Can you discuss that a little bit and how that IPEDS data is reported?
Okay, so I'm going to turn that. I appreciate your question and
Okay.
the opportunity to clarify this for you. And I am going to invite Alicia Crouch to walk you through that definition, because I'm afraid that I will just rip it to shreds. So Alicia, if you don't care to walk her through.
Sure, thank you. So the leadership is defined as what we report to IPEDS as the management position. So that would include anybody in those traditional leadership positions like the cabinet level, as well as folks like academic deans. So at Maysville, it's 21 folks, and 2 of those folks are listed in IPEDS as Black African-American women. So that's where that a little over 9% comes from. That is from November of 2020. So the data that
that was presented is based on the data that was in the CPE plan that was reviewed this last time. So those numbers have dropped a little bit. So there are now 23 people at Maysville in those positions with one Black African American woman. So you will see, that is a little bit of dated information on that 9%. Does that help clarify a little bit?
It
So
does.
the data.
It does, but it does, but it doesn't. I think in the way in which people at each individual college view themselves, because you mentioned a cabinet, we don't have a cabinet, so there is no one representing the URM students at that level that they see. I mean, they would see in a leadership role, is what I'm saying. So I think I just, and even still 23-1, or you said 2 out of 21. I mean, it just seems particularly inflated to me, and that just made me cautious about all the other numbers as well. Not that they're wrong. I understand it's self-reporting, and I get that. I just want to make sure that we're basing or looking at this the right way, and I just didn't want to be in the wrong, I guess. So.
I think that's
Thank
a
you.
really good point. And I thank you for bringing that up. And again, you being there and working with these people every day and seeing this for yourself, sometimes the data is a little bit deceiving, and not in a negative way necessarily, but it doesn't always tell the picture. And so, the full story. So that perspective is very important. And as Regent Green just, asked the question, and that's going on in her own college, it begs the question, if she's in HR at that college and isn't aware that these initiatives are going on, maybe we have a little bit of a communication problem. And if we have that internally, how well are we communicating that to our communities, or to, legislators or the state or other stakeholders in this very important DEI conversation, that we are doing, good work to try to meet these goals and these objectives, if we don't know what's going on within our own facilities or our own campuses. So I appreciate that perspective very much. So as you went through this, Dr. Gibson, thank you so much, informative information there. As you went through the college's plans, the DEI plans, did you find any that you felt were deficient in any way, or that could have been improved upon? Or as you look across the 16 colleges, would it be possible to say we can formulate an overarching DEI type of plan at the system level to make this a little more efficient?
That's a really interesting question. And what I would say is, I think all of our colleges do an excellent job being responsive to the needs of their local communities. And while we have had a system-wide plan, I think ultimately much of the work is done local. It's kind of like local government. It happens. You said government was not a good example, but things happen locally, right? And so I think what is important for us in terms of having a system level support plan, I think what that looks like is creating perhaps a set of, maybe we already have it with our strategic plan. Our strategic plan is set forth for 2022 to 2026. We've already sort of established that we are going to infuse the DEI throughout our plan, and we're going to move off of these big strategic numbers, and we're going to dig into our data. I believe, and then we're going to ultimately continue to support our colleges as they execute their local plans, and we're going to continue to consult with them and make sure that they do basically what they say they're going to do in their plans. I think we are already making a lot of strides in that way, just by saying that we are going to take deep dives and look at the data and look at underneath the big numbers to disaggregate and understand how our students are faring. And then I think what we do really well, or at least what we have done really well over the years, is take that information and then go back to the colleges and ask questions about what you're doing to implement your plans through our mock review process that we do with the colleges when they prepare to submit their reports to the Council on Post-Secondary Education. So I think we have that plan in place, quite frankly. I think it maybe looks different than most people would think, but it really is just, we're assuming a consultation role, if that makes sense, to our colleges.
Two things I would add. Definitely want to compliment Dr. Gibson because as she mentions, that mock review process for the diversity plans is huge. And I think it's reflective in the success that we've had with CPE, right? I think that the last one that we had, I think 13 of the colleges met the marks and their common metrics. So that's a really important baseline. I think prior to COVID, if memory serves me correct, we had explored the thought of doing some climate surveys for the colleges to also put some context around the atmosphere at colleges. So I think there's an opportunity there to add that into the mix as well too. Move this effort forward. But it is a very complex and to Regent, I believe Brianna's point, the percentage of the numbers is an interesting dynamic, but it is reflective of the complexity of the work. I think a good baseline and certainly sharing best practices across colleges is a way to move us closer to the mark.
And so I'm just going to jump in really quick since he mentioned that. One of the things that we are going to do as a result of the internal mock review that we did at the system office this past, I guess it started in December of 21 and continued through middle of January, is we are going to we have already pulled best practices for each college, and we are assimilating those into a report. I'm calling it a compendium. My team says it's a report. We're going to distribute that out to the colleges so that they have an opportunity to understand not only what am I doing at my campus, but also what are my peer colleges doing. And one of the things that we're trying to encourage and cultivate is this peer-to-peer relationship. We are really there just to set forums, give people space from the colleges to come together around these plans to inform each other and work with each other across institutional walls.
So Dr. Gibson, when we were presented the data on, and I believe it was from the CPE data, we had 3 colleges that did not meet their objectives around this. Was that a surprise to anyone?
Well, it always is a surprise because we always think all of our colleges are going to make it. So it was a little bit of a surprise. There was one college in particular that was a surprise. We were shocked. And I think there was just to be honest, I think it was some formatting questions that came up for the college, one of the 3 colleges that didn't make it. And we could never have predicted that when we went through our review. It just, sometimes when you're copying and pasting into a tool, sometimes you just get off on that. And I can't explain what happened there, but it did. And there was really not much that we could do about that. For the other 2 colleges that did not make, we knew from a quantitative standpoint that they might not. And so as soon as we knew it, we informed them that you really are going to have to double down on your narrative and what you tell the CPE. And oftentimes, really, the best thing to say is to admit that you maybe missed, and then formulate very quickly in that assessment, acknowledge it, and then what are you going to do to fix it going forward? And so it's disappointing, I suppose, is maybe the better way to say it, that they didn't make it. But, we're going to do what we can going forward to make sure that all 3 of these colleges, I'll be spending a lot of time with them over the next few months, probably between July 1 and October, helping them, be responsive to the improvement plan that is required by the council. Dr. Williams, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to point out that all of the three colleges that did not pass were within 1 or 2 points. It wasn't like it was a big gap in not passing. We do have their scores. They were very close. So it's difficult to know, since those reports are read subjectively by a group of people at CPE, the lens that they were using rather than the lens that Dr. Gibson and her survey, her review team crafted. So I mean, it's a small consolation perhaps, but it was a loss by a point or 2 points, not by a gap of 5 or 10 points. And so we will be supporting those folks to file appeal, as Dr. Zarpadas noted in the Teams chat. And that will, we expect that they would pass that appeal, so that because they were so close, and it may be more of style narrative or technological error than it is actual plan and progress. Now, the colleges will not be able to apply to provide new programs of study until they pass that waiver. So they are under a sort of a program of study freeze, for lack of a better word. But I appreciate the effort that they put into it. And in fact, one of the colleges the year before had been held up as a model report. So it was very odd that the next year they lost by a point. So you can see that there's, you were talking about inter-rater validity earlier, and it may be that some of it is how CPE chooses to review. So we're just, I think everybody's making the best effort that they can, and they'll continue to move forward under that effort.
So I guess, and again, our optimization goal here. So knowing that, and retrospective analysis is still worthwhile, knowing that they did not pass, have we learned from our internal or our peer review group or whoever with Dr. Gibson and her group, have we learned from that experience what we may be able to do going forward to prepare for the next time, or if the appeal is won, to shore that up for the next round of assessment? I mean, I'm assuming yes. It sounds like you've already got another plan in place.
So I would just, and maybe our presidents would like to speak to that, but I will say we do pay attention to, and we do try to analyze and work really closely with the CPE reviewers to understand their perspective. We go back to our feedback from the mock review, and then we will sort of recycle and put on the ground to the colleges, probably starting in the summer of next year. Hey, this is what we learned from last year's process. You should already be in the process of beginning to assess and begin to write for 21-22, which is the year that we're in right now, because it's always a retrospective review. Here's what we learned, and now you need to be thinking about that and putting that into context, and using that information to refine your narrative and your work, as well as your work, not just the report, but your actual work that is on the ground.
Very good. Regent Damaris.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. One of the things that was mentioned earlier is that, and this is a strategic goal that was approved by the Board of Regents as part of the strategic plan, was to ensure that DEI was infused in that strategic plan. And when I look at your metrics, I can see very easily how we can infuse and use those metrics to evaluate employer success very easily, because we're looking at who our people are, what positions they're in, how many people are represented in those positions. I can also see it in our student success as well. But one of the other tenets we have, and the third one that's very important to us, is our employer success. And so I'm just wondering, and you don't have to answer the question today, but as you think about how you're going to gather data, how are you going to infuse the DEI goals, which are very inward focusing? We can sort of manage our people that we hire, and we can manage our somewhat, recruiting our students and getting them into our doors. But how do we reach out to those employers and partner with them to ensure that they are, in fact, as successful as we'd like them to be from a DEI perspective. And so I give that as a question for you to think about, and a challenge that I know the board will probably be asking Dr. Williams as she presents on her KPIs from the strategic plan. You know, how is, show me what DEI looks like in those three realms. And I can see it in employee and I can see it in student. I'm wondering how I'm going to see it in employer. So
That's a great challenge, and I'll just answer it really quickly by saying we're already having some conversations with Jesse Shook about careers, about work, not careers, but with our work in terms of interfacing with employers. We're already beginning to have some initial conversations with her, and so I absolutely expect that we will. This will be part of the mix of metrics that we'll be looking at.
great. Thank you so much.
I don't know what it looks like yet, but I do know that we will.
Yeah, and I didn't expect you to answer it today.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure the challenge was out there so you had it on your list.
Got it.
Dr. Gibson, Brianna's got her hand up as well.
Yes, I was just coming back to her. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Dr. Gibson. So I think I just want to make sure I heard this correctly earlier. So, and maybe it wasn't you that mentioned it, but is there a identified DEI person at every college?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
We have a diversity peer team, and that peer team includes one administrative representative or staff person from each college. It's a long-standing peer team.
So my second question would be, I know that, say, for example, I think I heard someone else mention earlier, there might be a DEI coordinator position. I'm just talking position-wise. So a person who's wholly dedicated, since it's in our strategic plan. I know it's in our president's plan. I know it's in his goals and objectives. So is there talk of making that position a coordinator position across, or are folks still playing double duty at some institutions?
I'm going to defer that. I will say that every college has a diversity director. I should say a diversity peer team member that staffs this formal peer team. I think we all have had to wear multiple hats, right? So I'm going to defer that answer to the presidents. Maybe they would like to speak to how they organize their diversity positions.
We traditionally have a DEI coordinator. Right now, we're still in search of filling one, but we've had one for quite some time. We always centralize it though through the diversity committee, so that everything doesn't revolve around that one individual. And then certainly as president, I'm centering in all of those conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion at the college.
At Hazard, we have a very active Equity and Inclusion Council. I sit on that council as well. It is chaired by one of our faculty members, and we have faculty and staff who sit on that council. As far as our diversity report, we have a number of people who work on the report and implementing our plan. So we have a plan, and then we implement the plan, and then we report on that plan back to CPE. So we have a number of people. We have representation from the Equity Inclusion Council, but we also have our CAO, our CSAO, myself, and the HR director who work on that report and make sure that we work with everyone to make sure that we are implementing everything that we said we were going to implement. Now, we had a diversity coordinator who was on staff. She actually just resigned over the last year. I guess it was summer 2021. To take a new position, but we're kind of growing our own person because we have a URM non-traditional student who began working as a work study in our admissions office, and then he began working in the diversity office along with the diversity coordinator, and he is currently working on his bachelor's degree through Morehead State, and we have employed him full-time as a recruitment specialist specializing in the recruitment and retention of underrepresented minority students. And you can tell I get excited talking about him because he's doing a wonderful job. Dee Parker, I'm going to give him a shout out. And so he actually, we're hoping he'll be finished with his degree very soon, and we're hoping to move him into the coordinator position. That's the plan. So we don't have a coordinator right now, but we have one that we're trying to grow into the position.
That is wonderful. Thank you for that. That's a great way. Grow your own. I love that. I absolutely love that. I'm sure if our student regents were on this meeting right now, they would be applauding that. That's something that I think Regent Strauss asks almost at every meeting is, you know, can we involve students with that? Can we hire students for that? I hear her advocating for her peers quite often, and I know she's just graduated. So that's exciting, and thank you for sharing that. Well, I think that this is a really good start on this topic of conversation, and I do want to kind of wrap it up in this moment. I have two kind of action items under this topic, and I know that we focused very much on students and their success as it comes to DEI, but one of our other goals from the previous meeting was to talk about specifically alignment of personnel, job descriptions, job positions, and other kind of efficiencies that would be kind of housed under this same topic. And I know that Dr. Zarapata and I have talked at length about his desire for the new VP coming in to kind of have a big voice in this conversation. But for us today, I have two action items going forward that we'll need to come back to at our next meeting. And that is data from Dr. Gibson and Dr. Williams's group on technical credentials. So data on women in those technical credentialed programs, as well as more data on leadership and how we are meeting our DEI goals in leadership. And then I also have, I've jotted down, do we want to make a recommendation as a committee to the board in June about better defining perhaps or recommending that there be a dedicated or a devoted diversity director or coordinator at each college. Any thoughts about those two goals for the next meeting, or those two items to be discussed at the June board meeting?
I'll pipe up.
Yes.
I brought the second one up. I think that's essential. I know, as Dr. Gibson said, we're all wearing a lot of different hats and pulling double duty. But this is something that is so embedded into our strategic plan. Like I said earlier, Dr. Zarapata, it's you know, his goals and objectives. It's one of the top priorities of his. So I feel that this is something that is really important to each campus. And I think it shows a commitment as well to our communities, but what we're, you know, our intentions.
So, and I know budgets are tight, and of course, we don't want to be seen at least want to give a pretty good percentage of someone's time and efforts to this at each of the individual colleges. Not that they may not already be doing that, and maybe that's just more of that data, Dr. Gibson, that you could collect on how much time is devoted and how much time is outlined in a particular job description. And maybe Regent Green could even speak to this from the HR perspective. If someone is wearing another hat as a coordinator or a diversity director, how much of their time is really devoted to those specific duties? Regent Green, I see your hand up, and I'm so glad to see that.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to echo what Regent Witten said about
making this priority. And, you know, since it is part of our overall strategy, I think it's important that we really do make a statement with what we do and our actions behind that. As far as your question about the additional duties, it would depend on probably the individual. If we're talking about someone who's in a faculty role, a staff role, there's the possibility that they would receive additional compensation for those additional duties. And that would be, you know, in the form of supplemental pay for however long, you know, that college was able to continue that. But I think it is really important that we do establish a rule across the board that we do have someone at each college. You know, as we've said, everything's kind of stretched thin right now, but we are prioritizing that, and that we are making a concerted effort to make sure that we have someone at each college that's infusing that in everything that's being done.
Very good. Thank you so much. Chair Damaris, are you still with us?
I am.
Would you like to see that as an informational item, or would you like to see that as a recommendation from this committee that the board consider a diversity coordinator or a diversity director type policy for each campus?
Yeah, I would definitely like to see it as a recommendation. You know,
Okay.
I'm a big believer in that what gets measured gets done, and that what gets resourced gets done. You know, even if it is a shared role from somebody, at a minimum, it would have to be at least 50% of their job, if not more than that. But again, you know, so, and I have done this in my own career. I've held multiple hats, and it gets really mentally stressful to try to do, you know, one job and then put your other hat on and do another job. And I feel for anybody who is trying to do that. So I would love to see it as a recommendation, and it would be my hope that it's 100% of someone's job.
If I can just make a clarification, and I'm sorry if I'm overstepping, but we do have data that I think we'll be able to share with you to help you determine whether or not a recommendation along this line is absolutely necessary. I think each of our colleges probably does have a person, and we have some information about the percent of effort that each of these individuals is offering in the diversity space. So I think we can probably pull that together for you, perhaps through Dr. Williams, to share with you, Regent Fletcher.
And feel free to share it with the entire committee. When you send it to me, you can, it's fine with me that you share any data. And Dr. Williams, I did want to make that point. Any data you share with me, feel free to share with the entire committee, unless it's something that you think I need to vet first or take a look at or condense first. I'm happy to do that as well. Okay, so again, we still have another agenda item. And so if everybody is okay with that, we have our action items under DEI. We're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is building utilization. This was a topic that I had asked about in regards to, you know, we are looking at some new building funding versus improving campus utilization in current existing buildings. And I had asked for Dr. Williams, Dr. Zarapata to have the college presidents kind of pull some information for us. And I think you are seeing that now, even though I will say, Hannah, that is very, very small on my screen. I don't know if anybody else can see that or if there's a way. Yeah, there you go. So we have been given this little spreadsheet that kind of shows some information about shared space. You know, one of the things that we were given at the previous board meeting was what was titled a snapshot of an estimate. And it occurred to me at that point that maybe we are not tracking facility utilization as well as perhaps we could be. I do think that one of the things that really resonated from the Ivy Tech presentation was that when they went to single accreditation, that they were able to consolidate some programs to do some of these resource hubs, and they eliminated 100,000 square feet of buildings that's decreasing a lot of costs for things like, maintenance and utilities and liability and all kinds of things. And so I saw that as an opportunity for us to try to take a look at our spaces and see if we could find some opportunities for efficiencies within the individual colleges as far as space goes. So I do appreciate the information that has been given for us to review. Excuse me. And I don't think there's anything surprising in there. I think anyone who has any ties whatsoever to their local colleges understands that those are often not just, centers of learning, but they're also very highly utilized by the community. They are wonderful partners to the community in all aspects of space, and being able to use that space for things like continuing education within the community. I have a very good friend who's an electrician, and he talks about, running to the community college on a Saturday morning to get his electrical certification CE, for the year. And I know that, our chamber sometimes uses this space at the colleges. Lots and lots of things going on out in those facilities. However, we also know that we have some very, very old buildings and a lot of cost going into the upkeep and the maintenance of those. And so as you look through, I just wanted you to have an idea of direct and indirect use of those spaces, and then see if anyone had suggestions or recommendations outside of the one that's already been made, which would be to recommend to the Board of Regents from this committee that we do put out a request for proposal for an outside entity to come in, do a very objective, standardized review across the 16 colleges to give us some ideas on where we may be able to downsize in some areas. We know that there are populations that are diminishing within our communities, certain parts of the state that are losing people at this point, numbers of students going down, enrollment going down pretty dramatically, and even more of our students moving to online services, which means that there are fewer people in the buildings, and quite often not very many people other than a few faculty or staff members present on any given day. I had a faculty member to tell me that they, literally sat out in the parking lot one morning, and in 4 hours, about 16 cars was all that was on the lot at any given time. Doesn't seem like a very good utilization of space, but again, was a day, most students were in class online and not in the building, for example. So I would take any questions or any comments on this information that has been provided. Dr. Zarapata, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I would. I would back up the comment that I do think an external study would be well worth it.
I was really pleased to see the data about energy savings and the contracts. Many of those that I was sent, many of those have already completed, at least in their round one. Millions of dollars have been saved in energy and water costs over the last decade and a half. There are a few of the colleges that are entering a round two on those same energy cost saving contracts, which is good. I mean, that does tell me that people are, aware that there's an opportunity to decrease their energy consumption, their water consumption, and things of that nature. I guess my question to Dr. Zarapata and anyone, any of the presidents on here as far as facilities go, if there is this dashboard that can help you to turn off the lights remotely or stop the water flow or, increase the temperature when no one's in the building or lower the temperature when no one's in the building, whatever the case may be, for cost savings, why are not all 16 colleges participating in that? Is that just a local availability issue? Is that something that there just needs to be contracting around? Can somebody answer that question for me?
Are you talking about the energy savings initiative?
Yes.
Part of it is because some of those systems are so old that they won't work with the energy savings technology.
Okay.
And so as those systems are updated, they will be put on board.
Okay. It looked to me like we had about 8, is that right? 8 or 10 of the 16 that were participating?
I want to say that 10 participated. I don't think we have anyone from facilities on there, but I can get that information and send it back to the group.
Okay. I think that would be helpful, but does anyone have any comments or concerns about the information in the spreadsheet? I do think there was a question that arose about how the data is being collected on utilization. In the last meeting, again, coming off of that snapshot of the estimates, I think we have had some follow-up from at least one of the colleges about some different numbers that were coming from someone else collecting data, and just wanted to know if we had any harder numbers on that, Dr. Zarapata.
Harder numbers.
So more objective numbers than the estimates or the subjective data that was kind of given by the presidents. Are we actually monitoring numbers of hours of people in building, who's in the buildings, those kinds of things?
That I'm not positive on. I don't think so.
Okay. Regent Damaris.
Yeah, I just wanted to first very much support the recommendation of having an outside utilization study done. I think that, you know, it's an area of expertise that is very vertical in nature. There are very qualified firms nationally that do this work every day, and a lot of them do it in post-secondary. And so I think that's an excellent recommendation. The one thing I would add to the recommendation, however, is I think when you look at space utilization, it's not always just sizing down. It's right sizing and using it more effectively. And I'll cite the local example I have here in my backyard in northern Kentucky, where Gateway has recently undergone this type of a study and has decided to actually remodel what was a more traditional office type building in our downtown area on Madison Avenue, and bring advanced manufacturing to the downtown area. And that was previously out in more of the suburban areas in Boone County versus being right downtown in Kenton County and Covington. And it was because the students were located closer to the urban core who wanted to learn those skills. So I think as we do this study, it's not just about looking at what we can close down, shut down. I really think it needs to be looked at as how can we possibly reuse, retrofit, relocate in some cases programs that might need to be closer to where the students are. And also very hard look at what programs are expanding, what demand areas are expanding, and how can we make use of potentially some expansion efforts. So I would hope that we just, you know, when the RFP comes together, it has a holistic narrative of we want to use our space to the best ability to serve our students, whether that means reduction, increase, retrofit, whatever that means.
Yeah, and I think a really
that may
good
mean expansion. There are campuses that may need additional facilities.
Yes,
absolutely. And I take a look at just at Big Sandy, where a lot of their draw now is out to Pikeville, and that's, you know, not where they've traditionally been. And so there's a lot of changes swirling around there. And I did want to just touch base really quickly. Buddy just messaged me. 10 of our colleges are participating. All 16 will be on board with this, and some of it is updating these heating and cooling systems, but others are just getting them on board. So.
Okay, very good. So there is a potential for some efficiency and cost containment from an energy standpoint anyway. So that's very good. Thank you for that. And text Buddy and say that I really appreciate him
I will
letting
do
us
that.
know that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I'm seeing hands. Okay, Regent Witten.
Sorry.
Are you
I just
muted?
wanted to,
Yeah.
I'm here. Yeah, I was muted. Sorry. I wanted to echo what Regent Damaris said about right sizing. I can just think of two examples of the presidents that are here. The University Center of the Mountains. I mean, you know, we were there. We were lucky enough to go have our meeting there, and that's just a wonderful space utilization. And then I would love to know more when he has time, but Dr. Reese's, the SPOT, student assistants, or the Goodwill Industries, right? The goodwill that you have, and just the iLead and the coding things that you're doing. It just seems that everybody's using the right, I think they're utilizing the space the right way. But when you were talking about hubs, Regent Fletcher, were you talking about creating different hubs that are already existing, or that was something I just wanted to follow up with you?
So the hubs would not be part of the building utilization part as much unless that we found in this process, not just with buildings, but in thinking about consolidating those administrative services, if we were able to downsize some of that space or right size some of that space by housing a hub in a regional area where they may have more space to house something like human resources for 2 or 3 schools, where they may have the opportunity to maybe have academic advising or online advising as a regional hub in another area where maybe they don't have as many students on campus, but we could put a hub in that space or in that facility that would then serve 2 or 3 campuses. Maybe in one of the areas where someone needed to expand a program, they would take over office space, for example, for student advising or for HR, and then those HR folks would move to the next local college as a hub. So again, that's part of the conversation, but not completely part of this and not completely separate from this either. It all, in my mind, that all kind of rolls together.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So let's see. Yes, Ty Handy.
Sure. So I guess I want to approach it from a president's perspective, where every day I'm looking at how we can be more efficient. And when I look at my the colleges I've been at, including those in Kentucky, what I find about public higher education is the capital expenditure process is largely a political process. And so I can spend lots of time trying to manage fixed costs and not make a tremendous amount of headway because my efficiency measures aren't going to show whether I'm doing a good job of that or not. When in fact, if I managed my variable costs more effectively, I get a lot more mileage out of that. And at the risk of alienating a community, I'm going to say this. Well, we built a $16 million facility in Carrollton. It's a wonderful facility. It's the result of a political process. It will never pass any individual efficiency measure that we can come up with to try to look at whether or not it's being used effectively, because it was the result of a political process and not a conscious decision that we need, 50,000 square feet in a place that's going to support 200 regular students. And so we wind up with the fixed cost side of the house having, and the risk, the detrimental risk associated with making adjustments to that campus and the community reaction to that would be such that we would be running for cover because it is an expected quality of life attribute for that community. So I think when we hire somebody to do this search or to do this analysis, we need to be careful and take it with a grain of salt because of the politics that underline how these things are awarded or what have you. And so we most recently went through Governor Bevin's $100 million program for economic development. By the same token, there are facilities that came from that and investments that came from that were as much political as they were maybe need driven. And that's just the nature of the business we're in, because unlike companies, we're not able to do capital rationing the way a company would approach that. And so it is a factor that I think we just need to recognize. And while, yes, we can probably be more efficient, we also have these campuses where if we look at shutting down a building, it affects the quality of the entire campus. So we might save something temporarily in a variable cost, but we lose something ongoing because of the impact of a shuttered space on what is actually still a viable sort of college operating campus. So I'm constantly having to sort of think those things through. I'll use a second example that'll probably surprise you, I think. Our Southwest campus here at Jefferson at its peak had over 3,000 students. Today it has 1,400. But to take any one of those buildings completely offline because of the way that campus is designed would be very detrimental to the feel and the climate of that campus. So I think there's a bigger context that we also have to be willing to look at, to look at these sorts of decisions. And quite frankly, as a president who focuses on cost control, I find that looking at variable costs, I get a lot more return on investment by focusing on things like average class size and things of that sort that are variable cost driven, as opposed to the fundamental building that was fully funded by state and local sort of investment, that sort of thing. I hope that makes sense, and I'm not opening a can of worms, but I think as a president, we have to triage our financial efficiency focus. And I've found personally that variable cost management is much more effective in terms of control, having an effective budget and freeing up resources. Does that make sense, or am I?
It certainly does to me.
Okay.
And we have a little saying around here that when politics gets you something, politics also gets you out of something. And so I think that historical perspective of politics probably built a lot of buildings in the past, and even maybe in the recent time period. I think those same legislators who maybe campaigned for those buildings to be built as a show of support and for their communities, it's their passion for their communities. Those same legislators are now asking us to be good stewards of taxpayer funds and to make sure that we are utilizing our spaces. And I know that raising buildings is never a popular decision. I'm here in Moorhead, where I've watched building after building go down in my community at my local university, my alma mater, multiple times over the last few years. And it's always a tough call when you have to raise a building, but sometimes it's just absolutely necessary.
Sure.
And I think the conversations around that are very important. The historical perspective, honoring that work that was done previously and all has to be there's nuance to that. So I totally respect that and understand that and do think that perspective has to be considered. But I'm not saying go tear down any building that doesn't have full classrooms. Just maybe looking at better ways to utilize that, maybe to initiate some PPI or PPPs, other ways to do it, maybe resourcing in a different way, maybe subletting some of that space for a community venture, whatever it may be, as long as it works into our mission and adds value to the campus and to the community. That's what we're looking for this study to help us to do. So I really appreciate your comments. I don't think you're going to alienate anybody with that. I think most people understand that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments on the building utilization piece? So I guess one of the recommendations, other than the external study on the building utilization, something else that came up in this conversation is that do we have a liability in not knowing who is in our buildings at any particular given time? What if there is a safety concern? And I'll use the terrible example of an active shooter. If we do not know how many people are in that building, how do we make sure that everyone in that building has the opportunity to be safe in that building? When we're looking at, estimated utilization instead of actual scheduled times, hard numbers, someone accountable for the space when it is being used at all times, does that pose any liability to us? And is that something that we need to consider or have addressed in the external study on the building utilization? Anybody have any thoughts or comments on that or can answer that question? Yes, Honorable Pam Duncan.
So that would be a complicated issue. When you're looking at particularly active shooter cases. So for instance, if you remember the the Virginia shooting, there was an issue of whether they should have known about this because there were counseling sessions, discussions with this particular student who was the shooter, who made basically threats toward the community. And so there is a foreseeable nature on that. And then there are various laws that go around active shooter situations and how they're worked out in liability issues. But that said, it would all go back to that foreseeability issue. So if we felt like, I don't know that we could ever know everyone who would be in our buildings at all times. The question would be, is there some sort of rough estimate? But is there then also a foreseeability of this particular issue occurring? So I think there are too many variables that would go into saying whether we would be liable or not, but you can certainly bet that we need to have reasonable plans in place for the possibility of something occurring. But being responsible for everyone at every moment is not something I think that the law would hold us to.
Very good. Thank you for answering that. Okay, so it is getting quite late in the day. Is there more on this particular subject that we need to discuss from the data that we've been given, or are we all comfortable with the recommendation to the board, given the ESPC data that we have and the college efficiency spreadsheet that we've received from the presidents? Does anybody have any further comments, or are we comfortable with going forth with recommendation to the board for an external study on building utilization?
So I'm not reluctant to do that sort of thing. I would like to ask that it include, or that we think about including their expertise on not just the structures themselves. In other words, they may be able to look in and see some things operationally that we can be doing differently, and we ought not limit them to the utilization of a space. We ought to give them a broader opportunity, because I truly think that's where the bigger savings might be.
I agree with that, Ty.
So word that, Dr. Handy, into a particular recommendation. How would you want the board to receive that recommendation?
So I'm going to need to think about that, but I'm as interested in not so much the space itself, but within a space, what proportion of that space is being used, and class loadings, and how many, are we running courses in spaces that hold 36 students and we've got 4 students in there, and question why we are doing something with just 4 students as opposed to where it's located. It may be an operational piece that we're just not we haven't figured out. So I just would like to think they're probably experts on more than just space utilization, and we ought not limit their ability to offer some guidance, counsel, external support Because I actually think that's probably a larger saving. I've shuttered a couple buildings. We've shuttered a couple buildings over summer months and things of that sort. And inevitably we save a few dollars and this and that. And then we end up spending more when we bring it back online because of having it shut for so long. That messes with old systems and things of that sort. So it isn't, it's less about the buildings and more about what are the opportunities for efficiencies related to overall use of our colleges, not just the spaces themselves. I don't know how to say that, but I'll have to think about it.
Regent Fletcher, this is Regent Damaris. I think
Yes.
what Dr. Handy is referring to is a concept called space planning. So really planning the use of different pieces of space versus how are they being used today. It's looking at it from both sides of the coin.
Okay. We will make that recommendation then to the board in June. So we'll figure out a clever way to word that so everyone knows that we are encompassing this entire conversation in that one recommendation. And that may take a little help from you, Chair Damaris, on the space planning conversation. That's not something I know much about, but I am happy to pull in my resources. So, okay. Is everyone comfortable with that? Any other comments or questions? If not, we are going to move to our last agenda item. I think we kind of have our action plans for the ROC and our report to the board we've summarized as we've gone. So item D, we will be able to skip right through, but I do want to have a brief conversation at least about the HR and benefits. And I'm sorry for the late hour. It's just the nature of our very broad charge of this committee that it's taken some time to get through these, but all very important. Yes, Dr. Zarapod, I see your hand up.
I'll just say that I don't know if you want me to jump in here, if you want to say some words about the HR benefits later, but we'll be covering this next Thursday at the Policy and Planning Committee meeting, Thursday at 4:30 p.m. on the 19th.
Is that we don't have a whole lot to say on this topic until that committee meets and you're able to provide us with some information, some further information.
Correct, some information and some timelines.
Absolutely. So as you all know, in our last meeting, we did talk about the charge to Dr. Zarapod and the cabinet to come up with some ideas about HR benefits, particularly a cafeteria style plan that would allow our employees to kind of pick and choose the benefits that would be most helpful to them, to look at some different ways to offer benefits perhaps, but to start that whole conversation with a survey of our employees and perhaps of our vendors who offer those benefits to see if we can make the two match up pretty fluidly. And so there is work ongoing in this area. It is being looked at, it is being done. And as Dr. Zarapod just said, once that committee meets later this month, we will have more, a better understanding and more ideas on what they may be able to do with that. The other thing I wanted to make sure that we talk about from not just the HR benefits perspective, but going back to the DEI conversation, is that we do want to make sure that the benefits across the board, even in the cafeteria plan, would have equitable value, even if they may be different. So I just wanted to assure you all that charge has been passed along. So any questions or comments or information from any of the regents on what you're hearing on the HR front? Any clever ideas or recommendations for Dr. Zarapod as he heads into his next meeting with that group later?
Well, while you're thinking about that, I just want to thank everybody. I know that this is a thankless job doing these long committee meetings, but it really does help.
We are all here for the system's
Regent
success.
Fletcher,
yes.
Yeah, Regent Fletcher, I would just say that that anyone on this committee, if they would please, the System Policy and Planning Committee is live streamed. And so if you do have the opportunity to watch that meeting, I think it would be very helpful for you to see that. There's going to be quite a bit of discussion around where we're going in terms of compensation and compression. Dr. Zarapata will be presenting a lot of information on that as sort of a dry run for discussion within the committee before it goes to the full board. And he will also address the timeline of the benefit survey. One of the things I had said at our last board meeting was that it was important to the Board of Regents that we viewed benefits and salary as total comp. We don't want to do either or. And quite honestly, I think in the past, the board has addressed the salary side of the house on an annual basis because it feeds into the budget directly, and not so much address the benefit side of the house. But I think you're going to see that Dr. Zarapata's got a very nice presentation where he's dovetailing both of those concepts together. We're really having a total comp conversation and not a salary or benefits. And so I saw a preview of that presentation yesterday, and Dr. Zarapata, it's looking really good. So thank you.
Very good. Any other comments on benefits? So thank you all so much. I think this has been very very informative, and I do think that we are making some progress slowly but surely. Yes, Regent Whitten, sorry, I see your hand going up.
No, I knew you're getting ready to cut this off, and I don't want to be the person that holds us up. I would like to ask you if it's even possible. So the information that has been shared with the ROC group, in going over it myself, I had to go, of course, to some of my campus counterparts to kind of, ask questions and go forth. And some of the things that I showed them, especially in, with usage, building usage and things that other schools are doing, can we share those with, the stakeholders in our own colleges, and make sure they have this information? I mean, we're doing a lot of great things across the board, but do we all know that we're doing a lot of great things and things that maybe one campus could adopt, or a policy or a procedure that, Dr. Linden uses or Dr. Reese uses? I mean, can we do that with this information? I mean, there's some really great information, I think, to be mined for, in particular campuses.
I think Counselor Duncan may have an answer to that.
So these are all records that have been generated and therefore subject to open records. So even if somebody tried to say, no, don't share that, it is shareable. I think certainly I can't even talk, it's too late. Based on polite etiquette, I would just talk to the people that the information you're sharing and just say, do you mind if I share this? And I think all the presidents would say, absolutely so. At any time, collaboration is much better than just sitting on the best practices you have.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And any information, as I said, that is shared with me, I will ask anyone providing that information to share with the committee members. And so I will make sure, I'll look through my notes to make sure anything I've received gets out to you that you haven't already seen today. So we do need to set our next meeting, but I think that will not be until after the June board meeting. So if everybody is okay with that, we'll make that a to be announced, and we'll get a notice out to you pretty quickly. So are there any other questions or any other things that we need to address at this point? Y'all are amazing for hanging in this long. I appreciate it. And we will, now that we've got these big chunks of data and these big topics, we're kind of parsing them down. Hopefully the next meeting will be very much shorter than these last two have been. But again, thank you. I think this work is important. It's tedious, it's time consuming, but hopefully it will help us to meet our goal of helping the system be successful, which will in turn help our students be more successful in the future. So, Chair Damaris, any parting thoughts?
No, just a huge thank you to everyone. I really, really appreciate this. Every day that I talk to the folks who work at KCTCS, I learn more, and I continue to be impressed with the quality of the staff, the administration, the leadership. You guys are super awesome. This is great work, and I truly appreciate it. And a big thank you to Regent Fletcher for pulling everyone together. You know,
Yes,
it's
thank
the
you.
proverbial herding of cats, but we're getting there. So,
We're getting there. We're getting there. So from my voting regents, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Thank you, Regent Green. Regent Witten, I see a head nod. Yes, I'll take that as a second. Any opposed?
Bye.
Seeing none. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.